Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Vaughan Manor, where Roger and I have returned with the Edgar Rice Burroughs Show. It's the Edgar Rice Burroughs Show once again, and today we are going to be talking about that very mysterious character, John Carter of Mars. There's actually a lot of mystery surrounding John Carter. John Carter, who first showed up on the scene in this magnificent book, A Princess of Mars, and went on to star in the Martian series of Edgar Rice Burroughs, otherwise known as the Barsoom series, otherwise known as the John Carter of Mars series. And John Carter, there is a lot of mystery surrounding this guy, as you will see after I read the first paragraph of John Carter of Mars. Well, the first paragraph of chapter 1 of John Carter of Mars. I am a very old man. How old I do not know. Possibly I am 100, possibly more, but I cannot tell because I have never aged as other men, nor do I remember any childhood. So far as I can recollect, I have always been a man of about 30. I appear today as I did 40 years and more ago, and yet I feel that I cannot go on living forever, that someday I shall die the real death from which there is no resurrection. I do not know why I should fear death. I who have died twice and am still alive, but yet I have the same horror of it as you, who have never died. And it is because of this terror of death, I believe, that I am so convinced of my mortality. So John Carter of Mars, as it turns out, is an immortal warrior. And he is a warrior, as you find out when you read this book. He's basically a mercenary who has served many armies and has been fighting for years and years and years because fighting is his profession. But how many years? Well, he's not sure because, he never checked a calendar all that time. So who knows how old he is? He has some trouble with his memory, John Carter. Now, this is a pretty remarkable beginning for this book. Already, we have this striking fantasy element of an immortal character. And basically, that has nothing to do with the rest of the story. Mostly. John Carter goes on to be it's mystery, he's mysteriously transported to the planet Mars where he has all kinds of adventures, and where his skill at fighting comes in very handy. Also, once he gets on Mars, he discovers that because of the lower gravity of Mars, he has super strength and can jump everywhere. He can jump super high, and long distances, and he's so strong, he could basically kill somebody by hitting them once. I mean, he's basically a superhero on Mars. But the whole thing about his immortality is never explained. Not only is it never explained in this book, it's never explained at all as far as his backstory. Now, I'm not sure you can get away with doing something like that today. When you start this book and you read that paragraph, you fully expect that you will find out more about this. You will find out, well, who is this guy and why is he immortal and where did he come from anyway? But you never do. You never do. In fact, his immortality has so little to do with the actual story that's told in this book that when they made a film of it, what was it, back in 2012? I think that's when the movie came out. He wasn't immortal. He was just a regular guy in that movie. They just left that whole immortality part out. But then they changed the character in all kinds of ways in that movie. But you could easily leave that whole thing out and it would still be the same book. Except for a couple of things. First of all, his incredible fighting ability. It's explained, or you could explain it by the fact that he's been fighting for possibly centuries. We don't know how old this guy is. John Carter doesn't know how old he is. So he could have been fighting for, centuries. And over that time, he is going to develop his skills in combat. And that is why he is the greatest swordsman of two worlds, for example. It's because he's been fighting for hundreds of years, possibly. Who knows? Also, The Martians are a very long-lived race. They live to about 1,000 years old. They do grow old, but it takes a long time for that to happen. Now, John Carter is immortal, and so it's no big deal when he marries Deja Thoris in this book, because, he's immortal, so he's not going to grow old either. He's possibly going to outlive all the Martian friends that he has in this book, no matter how old they grow. So his immortality helps him in those two ways. But otherwise, it is never explored, ever, throughout this entire series, which leaves us with a lot of questions. Why is he immortal? What is he? What is John Carter? And of course, Edgar Rice Burroughs fans, different Edgar Rice Burroughs fans over the years have had different ideas about what he is actually. There are some theories that Edgar Rice Burroughs got the idea for making John Carter of Mars immortal from the book Fra the Phoenician, which was a book written by Edwin Arnold about a Phoenician who becomes immortal. And it's possible that Edgar Rice Burroughs read that book, but as far as I know, there's no proof, there's no real evidence that Edgar Rice Burroughs read that book. I don't think that anyone found that book in his library. It's just been theorized because he's that other immortal warrior that was in a book, and that Edgar Rice Burroughs could have read. So it's possible that Fra is an inspiration for John Carter, but we really don't know. As for what John Carter actually is, like I said, there have been theories. There's been the theory that John Carter is actually a Martian who was somehow transported to Earth hundreds of years ago. Now, the Martians tend to look different than John Carter. John Carter, for example, is one of the very few white guys on the planet Mars, and he's certainly the only white guy with black hair. There's a race of white Martians who are blonde, although those are wigs. They're actually bald like me. But most of the Martians are like green or red or bright yellow. They just tend to look different than John Carter does. However, in the distant past of Mars, there were people that looked like, white people from Earth. They have just gone extinct. And so it is possible, and it has been theorized, that John Carter is actually a Martian. And that's one of the reasons that he doesn't grow old. And he just doesn't know it. However, that would not explain how he could survive on Earth at all. If a Martian were transported to Earth, you would have to think that he couldn't even lift himself off the ground because of the difference of the planet's gravity. Like I said, John Carter does have super strength on the planet Mars because of the difference of the planet's gravities. So it's unlikely to me that he's a Martian transported to Earth who then is somehow transported back to Mars. It's an attractive theory because it does explain some things, but it seems unlikely. There's also the theory that he's half Martian, conceived in the distant past on the planet Mars, possibly by a woman who was transported to Mars in the same way that John Carter was, and that John Carter is a half Martian who went back to Earth with his mother hundreds of years ago and just doesn't remember for whatever reason. Again, there's no evidence of this. It's just a theory that's floating around out there. There are a lot of theories. That's all they are. John Carter remains mysterious. And John Carter, the character, is never focused on his past. He doesn't care where he came from or who he was 100 years ago. What matters to him is who he is now and who he's going to be and what he's going to do going forward in the future. And John Carter does identify himself as a Virginian. He's from Virginia. He fought in the Civil War. But is he a Virginian? You know, does he actually come from Virginia, or did he adopt that state at some point in the past? We don't really know. It's a mystery. He considers himself a Virginian, but it's entirely possible that he's something else entirely from someplace else entirely. He doesn't know. He doesn't seem to care. And why is this anyway? Why did Edgar Rice Burroughs think of this? And I think it's because Edgar Rice Burroughs, when he was conceiving this story, it started out as being more of a daydream than a story. This is Edgar Rice Burroughs' first published book. And at the time, you know, he was reading a bunch of Pulp Fiction, thought he could do better, and he came up with this story. But it really is a kind of a daydream, Edgar Rice Burroughs' daydream. And one thing Edgar Rice Burroughs hated was growing old. The whole idea. He didn't want to grow old. He didn't want his characters to grow old. So you'll find in Edgar Rice Burroughs' books that he finds all kinds of ways for his characters not to grow old. Even Tarzan finds the secret of immortality in the Tarzan series. So Tarzan becomes immortal. And you'll find that in many of Edgar Rice Burroughs' books. The idea of immortality, of not growing old. Because, yeah, Edgar Rice Burroughs was not a fan of getting old. And he did not want his characters to grow old. He wanted his characters to be eternal. He wanted to, you know, be able to go back, write his characters, and have them be, you know, the same as they were the last few books, you know. To continue to be young and have incredible adventures. And so he didn't really care too much why John Carter was immortal. He just wanted him to be immortal. He didn't want John Carter to ever grow old. And so he just left it a mystery. He didn't think about it too much, I think, when he started this book. And I don't think he really realized that it would be important. The same way that John Carter transporting to the planet Mars was left basically a mystery. You never really find out how this process happened. He left that a mystery because to him that wasn't really the important thing. The important thing was that John Carter get to Mars. Later on, he made more of an effort for this, about this kind of thing. But this is when he was first starting his career. This is his beginning, A Princess of Mars, as a storyteller. And so he was working stuff out. And he works a lot of stuff out in this book. A lot of stuff, actually, he works out in this book. His sense of pacing, a lot of stuff. But these things that he came up with for John Carter's mysterious immortality, how he got to Mars, you know, he stuck with these things because this is how he started the series. He just set these things down and ran with it. And it didn't really matter too much to him. And I don't know that it's mattered too much to the readers of Edgar Rice Burroughs' books either. Once you get into the story, you know this about John Carter, but it doesn't really matter so much because you're so invested in what is going on right now. How is John Carter going to get out of the situation that he's in? You're not thinking so much about John Carter's past. Like John Carter himself, you're thinking about John Carter's present and how he's ever going to have a future. Because he's going to have to get out of whatever trouble he's in at the moment. But we are left with this mystery of who and what John Carter is. John Carter might not care too much. Edgar Rice Burroughs might not have cared too much. But, you know, some of us fans kind of wonder and sort of wish we had gotten an explanation of some kind. It would have been nice, but then maybe there's something good about John Carter just being a mystery. Maybe his past just being a mystery is okay. We can make up our own theories about who and what John Carter is. I myself have no idea. I've had different theories over the years, but of course they're just fan theories. We will never really know. John Carter will remain a mystery. So that's John Carter and his mystery. I will talk more about this book in a future episode of the Edgar Rice Burroughs Show, and I will catch you next time.